The question is that the bill be now read a second time. I call the member for Deakin.
Thanks very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's an absolute honour to be able to speak in relation to these appropriation bills. And I think, whilst she's a friend of mine, the member for Bendigo indicated very clearly in her contribution why the Labor Party will never be able to deliver a surplus and will never be able to show the kind of fiscal responsibility that Australians expect of their mature federal governments, because in essence the Labor Party are now going around the country as a complaint box for every group who would like more money, and they are promising lower taxes, higher spending and a better bottom line outcome for the budget. So that's higher spending, lower taxes and bigger surpluses. Now, if the Labor Party think that Australians are so silly as to buy that, then I think they're going to be very sadly mistaken. And one thing that this budget does, I think it meets three very, very important objectives. Firstly, it gives us a believable, achievable and fair path to surplus. It does so whilst also restraining spending, and as an earlier speaker made clear, over the forward estimates, spending restraint is capped at about 1% growth a year, compared to somewhere near 3% when we inherited government. Finally, the third objective that I think this year's budget does quite successfully is improve confidence in the economy. Now, it's actually quite difficult to, in a sense, traverse those three competing objectives because they do compete in certain areas. But improving confidence without hitting the bottom line, I think, has been one of the great outcomes of this budget. And the first area that I'd highlight there is clearly our small business package. Now, it's been very popular, the accelerated depreciation, up to $20,000 for a piece of capital equipment that you may have to depreciate over a number of years. You can now depreciate in the year in which you buy it. So that means for businesses from budget night until 30 June, if you purchase a piece of capital equipment up to the value of $20,000, you can depreciate it this financial year. Now, that has absolutely reverberated through the small business community and is delivering confidence in spades. The beauty of the policy, though, is whilst it does that, there isn't a huge budget impact because we are, in a sense, freeing up small businesses to take the chance, take that next step, expand their business, and the economic benefits that will flow from that, in my view, will be increased tax receipts that outweigh the costs of the accelerated depreciation. So it's quite an extraordinary outcome, and it's, I think, quite instructive for both sides of politics, that we can make sensible budgetary changes and changes that improve confidence in the economy that don't have a huge bottom line impact on the budget. And I know that goes against the Labor Party's philosophy, which is that government is just one big spending competition and that we run around the country and have a competition as to who can spend more money. As a Liberal, we accept that we can never win that competition. If government in this country becomes a competition as to who can spend more money, guess what? Labor, you'll win every time. And in fact, we don't want to win that competition. We want to deliver the kind of responsible economic management of this country that frees up individuals, that frees up small businesses to do the things that they do best. That's create wealth for themselves, and then a benefit of that is that they create wealth for the rest of the country that we as a government take from them and redistribute to other people. Let's never forget that. Every dollar that we spend is taken from somebody else. So I think this budget in quite an efficient way manages those three priorities: a path to surplus, spending restraint, but improving economic confidence. I've spoken about the small business package in very, very broad strokes. I want to speak about it in a little more detail for the next couple of minutes. Obviously, the 1.5% tax cut for incorporated small businesses is good news for those small businesses that are incorporated. But given the deep small business background of many of us in this House, the Small Business Minister and indeed the Prime Minister and Cabinet have done an extraordinary job in recognising that lots of small businesses are not incorporated. So there's a tax cut also for unincorporated small businesses, 5% up to $1,000. Now that means that every small business, or a very, very huge proportion, 92% of small businesses will be receiving a tax cut through those mechanisms. Of course, accelerated depreciation has been exceptionally popular. I've seen examples of it in my own electorate, and last week I visited a number of small businesses. I visited Cafe MJ in Ringwood East, Bill and Mary, who do a wonderful job there, who are potentially looking to expand their business. I visited Daisy's Garden Supplies, who have significant investments in plant and equipment, and anything we can do to help them make those investments, to actually pull the trigger on making those investments, will reverberate throughout the Australian economy. I also visited Dewar Electronics, a business that's 45 years old, and they were very pleased to say that I was the first Member of Parliament that had ever visited them in 45 years. Well, what an outstanding success story this business was, competing on the world stage now, competing against really big global competitors from China in particular, but they're holding their own. And they're holding their own because they're a small family business. When times get tough, the wagons circle and they make it work. They get their costs under control, and they've got an exceptionally loyal workforce, which provides them with benefits that I think all small businesses need. And let's remember why we want to help small businesses. Often, small businesses treat their employees more like family than employees. Having grown up in a small business family, I can tell you right now, the rent gets paid first, the utilities get paid second, the employees get paid third, and if there's any money left over at the end, it goes to the small business operators. And for many small businesses, there are months and sometimes years when a payment to the small business owner never happens, because they are reinvesting it into the business, or times are tough and they're trying to build up the business. They pay themselves last. So anything that we can do as a government to assist small businesses in flourishing not only helps them, but helps their employees, because it creates opportunities. And one of the lamentable aspects, I think, of our current economy is that we cannot rely on the top 50 or top 100 ASX listed companies to provide us the job growth that they have in the last 40 years. Many of them are sitting on very, very healthy balance sheets. They've been able to repair their balance sheets since the global financial crisis, but those investments, certainly in our human capital, in growing our workforce, are not happening at the rate we'd like. So this package recognises that the jobs of the future will be coming more and more from young entrepreneurs, small businesses, and anything we can do to kickstart their growth is going to not only be good for them, but for the broader economy. In my state of Victoria, we also, in the budget, had a couple of very good infrastructure announcements. I was very, very pleased to see that $3 billion has been set aside in the budget for the East-West Link. This is obviously a very lamentable policy area in my state of Victoria, where we've got a state government who's spent up to $1 billion not to build a road. Nonetheless, we think, and certainly my electorate believes, that this piece of infrastructure is absolutely crucial, not only for the livability of the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, not only so parents don't spend all their time in their car on the way home from work and actually get to spend some time with their children, but actually the productivity benefits, the 7,000 jobs that will flow. So $3 billion has been set aside by this federal government for any future state government that is willing to build the East-West Link. And I think slowly but surely, Dan Andrews and the State Labor Party, and hopefully Bill Shorten, will recognise, and the pressure will become too strong and too great for them, that they will capitulate and recognise that spending up to $1 billion not to build a road in a city that's growing by hundreds of thousands of people was just the most outrageous decision ever, and that they will take us up on our offer. They will accept our $3 billion that we're generously putting on the table, and we'll get the East-West Link built. I don't want to get into the politics of this anymore. I just want to improve the lives of my citizens. I want to improve the lives of people living in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne. And how can you live in a big city if you can't get around? How can you actively participate in an economy if it takes you hours and hours to get from one meeting to another. So we have big challenges in dealing with transport infrastructure in Victoria, and $3 billion that's been set aside by this federal government in the 2015 budget, I think, will be something that Victorians thank us for in the future, because the East-West Link will be built. It will be built, and when it is built, I think our residents will be very pleased and will hopefully by then be very grateful for the bipartisanship on the issue, which we had for many, many years. The support for the East-West Link was bipartisan for nearly a decade. In my electorate of Deakin, we also had an outstanding announcement with respect to $3 million from the National Stronger Regions Fund for the Realm Project. The Realm Project, which is an initiative between the federal government, the Queensland Investment Corporation and Maroondah City Council, will build an innovation hub in Ringwood, a hub that just dovetails very nicely into our small business package. It will offer support for small businesses. As the Minister for Small Business often says, and to coin a phrase from him, it will help our mumpreneurs, people like my sister who have set up very successful small businesses from home, people who are looking to innovate, people who are looking to invest in R&D, people who are looking at taking advantage of the free trade agreements that this government has successfully negotiated with Japan, Korea and China. An innovation centre that helps them unlock all of the opportunities, because one thing we know, 20 years ago a small business had a small catchment in its own area. Nowadays, like my sister's business, a small business has a catchment of customers around the world. So how can we help people like her access those opportunities? Well, the Realm Project in Ringwood and the $3 million commitment from this federal government under the National Stronger Regions Fund is going to help them unlock those possibilities. And by unlocking those possibilities, we will improve the job prospects for our young people because we'll have a vibrant small business, and hopefully small businesses growing into medium and large businesses into the future. Other speakers on this bill have spoken about our support for families package. Obviously, I think every member of this parliament, when travelling around their electorates, would hear the lamentable stories from various constituents about how difficult it is for often, but not always, but often for mothers to juggle work and commitments with children, not only the funding of childcare, but just the logistics of getting them to and from childcare. So anything we can do to assist with those challenges, I think, is important, and this is one thing that the package does. And $3.5 billion of additional funding to support families will hopefully have a couple of dividends for our society. The first dividend will be increased participation. I know this statistic is reeled off a lot by government members, but I think it's very important. If we had female participation rates akin to the rates in Canada, a comparable economy, comparable in many ways, the dividend for our economy would be in the tens of billions of dollars. So we're hopeful, and indeed the research indicates that our jobs and support for families package will have that dividend. Finally, one thing that hasn't been spoken a great deal about is some of the great work that Susan Lee, the Minister for Health, has done in this budget. Firstly, in confirming our support for the Medical Research Future Fund. One of the more depressing aspects of last year's discussion and debate was the negative carping about the Medical Research Future Fund. Why have Australians enjoyed better health outcomes and higher average life expectancy over the last 20 or 30 years? Primarily it's due to medical research. And anything we can do to turbocharge medical research, which is an absolute area of competitive advantage for us, I think is important. So the $400 million for the Medical Research Future Fund, and indeed an ongoing commitment from this government that we will ensure that the Medical Research Future Fund ultimately reaches its capital amount of $20 billion, which will then enable it to fund ongoing medical research, particularly in my home state of Victoria. We are the medical research powerhouse of this country. So sure, I have a parochial interest in medical research as well. But I think that was an outstanding and not so spoken about aspect of this budget. So I'd say, and I'd congratulate the Treasurer, I think we get to meeting three competing objectives here of returning to surplus, restoring economic confidence and spending restraint. So I commend the bill to the House.
I thank the member.